Hello and welcome back to Lost in Sci-Fi and Fantasy. I'm your host Leo, and this week we are talking the absolute classic Final Fantasy VII. You know, the one that most people talk about when they talk about Final Fantasy. It's the classic one. It's probably one of the more popular ones because I believe it was the first proper one to be released on PlayStation. I believe later on, the first two, like the original two Final Fantasies were released, and then Final Fantasy V and VI were released, and then 4 was released with Chrono Trigger. I think the only one that didn't really make it to PlayStation was 3, I think. But that's kind of that. But this was like the first one made for and released on PlayStation. Followed, of course, by 8 and 9. And then 10 was the first one for PS2. But, anyway. Yes, so Final Fantasy is, a classic franchise. It has a nice little, mythology thing with it. And it's just a beautiful little series that each entry builds upon the last, and they make some changes here and there. It's a good old time. Now, as with a lot of things, my history with this franchise is one of curiosity. I was curious about it. Of course, you hear tons of things about it. And personally, I actually had a couple of Final Fantasy games on the original PS1. Well, technically my parents had it for PS1, and I was the kid, so I played it. But for the life of me, I cannot remember which ones they were. My best guess, based off of the way that things kind of worked and looked and whatnot, based off of my memory, the closest I can get to as to which game it was probably Final Fantasy IX was the main one I was looking at. And then I was very confused about the other ones. It was a whole ordeal, to be honest. A whole ordeal. Now, I tend to, with a lot of games, have this kind of rigid outlook of wanting to play the first one first, that's part of the reason I've been having some trouble with the Nier series, is because I want to play the first one first. It doesn't matter because they kind of aren't fully related to each other, but it's still one of those things that kind of grips you and makes you want to do something, right? Even if they are completely unrelated. So, I started playing the first Final Fantasy game on PSP, because they had the 20th anniversary version of the game, and I played it on PSP. Now, that's probably a story for another time. In fact, I might have already said part of the story when I was talking about Strangers in Paradise, because that's like a pseudo kind of remake of the first game. But I did end up getting stuck on that game and losing a ton of progress and having to restart. Sometimes that's just kind of the story of my life with RPGs. Sometimes is I always end up hitting a point where I either have to sit and grind for hours, or I have to actively restart the game and respec. Happens too much, honestly. But eventually, I did end up buying Final Fantasy VII on Steam. Getting it to run was a little bit awkward, and I actually got it and started playing it with the intention of it being a series on my YouTube channel. And that was 5 years ago. Now, as with a lot of things, circumstances ended up just happening, and I just ended up dropping doing my YouTube channel. Which, I'm gonna kind of do again, I'll be honest. It's not gonna be fully gone, of course. I'll still be posting the podcast to my YouTube channel, and I might do an occasional stream here or there. It's just it's not really helping much. Nothing's really happening, and the podcast seems to be doing pretty good so far. So I feel that I should probably put more focus in actually doing the things for that. And so yeah, so there's that. But anyway, this is an older version of that. I was doing at the time Final Fantasy VII and Tomb Raider Anniversary, I think it is, and I was doing them as like a companion series thing together. And it was going smoothly, but for some reason I ended up just stopping, and then I would pick up Final Fantasy VII every so often to get through. In fact, when they announced the remake, Final Fantasy VII Remake, I was like, okay, you know what, I'm going to hop in, and I'm going to at least get to the end of the first disc, because at the time I was assuming that the first game that they were doing for Final Fantasy VII Remake was going to be the first disc, and they were going to kind of like do it disc-wise, but no, that's not the case, and it makes a lot more sense that that's not the case now, but yeah, a lot of fun from what it seems, the way it's going to be now for Final Fantasy VII Remake is that the first game, Midgar, the second game is going to be like the rest of Disc 1, maybe, if we're lucky, a little bit into Disc 2. And then from that point on, like the last game will be Disc 2 and Disc 3. At least that's the potential layout. We'll talk a bit more about Final Fantasy VII Remake later, probably at the end, when we discuss some things. Now, I do also have a bit of a confession, real quick, before we continue. I still haven't finished the game. I am at the final boss. I have made many an attempt at the final boss so far. In fact, I had to, at one point, completely... Well, not completely, but like I had to go back to an older save and go back to the final boss and re-attempt the kind of run up to the final boss. But, we'll talk about that later. Mostly, I have shit time management, 1, and 2. The journey ahead is a very potentially tedious one. But, yeah. Anywho, with that. Yeah, so I started playing Final Fantasy for the YouTube channel. I got like 5 or 7 episodes in. Here, let me check. I got... It's in here somewhere. Playlists. Okay, so I got 4 episodes in, and it was the year of 2018 that I had done that. I did 4 episodes, each about almost an hour long. I wasn't very confident in moving forward, and I ended up just dropping it, along with Tomb Raider. Partially with Tomb Raider, it was because I ended up getting stuck on a boss. I was getting frustrated. But, yeah, so I set it down, started playing it on my own. I just chipped away at it slowly for the past, 5 or so years. I finally got to the point where I'm at the end of the game. I just have to finish the final boss. But with that said, let's go ahead and start talking the actual story. You know, it's a very famous and well-known story. At least the first 8 hours or so of it is. Because so many people do like the beginning. That's, I think, part of the reason why the first remake game was solely dedicated to Midgar, was because people... That's the main one that people remember. That's like the big section that people remember, especially the opening, the very beginning of the game, where you appear on a train. And you just... It's the train raid, or the intro sequence. So you are breaking into a reactor. As you work your way through, of course, you have the classic random battles, the bane of some people's existence. And these random battles are not the worst. They can get really annoying at times, especially when you're low on resources, especially in the early game. When you walk 10 feet and oh, there's another battle. Yay. But they're not too bad. This is one of the games that has a semi-cyberpunky, steampunky feel to it. Of course, at the time I was a little bit worried because I always looked at Final Fantasy and I preferred the fantasy aspect of Final Fantasy. You know, my favorite Final Fantasy is Final Fantasy IX, where for the most part it's all fantasy stuff with some airships thrown in here and there. And when they showed the trailer for Final Fantasy 15, I was like, seriously? It's just fucking modern now? Cars and shit? You know, to be fair, Final Fantasy 7 also did some stuff like that with trains and shit, and full-on guns. And even Final Fantasy 1, like, one of the super boss is a fucking robot. So, fair enough. I got shown that, yeah, there's been technology throughout the series, so I've eased into it a bit more, and I've platinumed Final Fantasy 15 at this point. But yeah, so you work your way through, you fight through the Shinra security people, also known as Soldier, and you perform a bombing run, essentially. You go, you set a bomb, and then you are attacked by the guard Scorpion. And the battling system in this is active. It is active combat, so each character has a little time bar, and based on their speed stats and whatnot, the bar fills up, and then you are able to select your attack. If you just sit there like an idiot, your enemies will still attack you regardless. It is not fully turn-based. Now, the active battle system, I believe, was introduced at the earliest in the 4th game. I think. It was either introduced in the 4th game or the 5th game. But it's supposed to be a way to help the flow of battle feel, I guess, a bit more realistic. But I do find it a bit annoying. Especially when you end up feeling that time pressure of, oh shit, if I'm going to heal, I need to do it now, or else I'm going to get fucking obliterated by this guy. So, yeah, that's part of the issue with the battle system I have. I've never been a big fan of the active battle system, and they've tried to tweak it every so often. It's pretty much been a mainstay up until the 10th game when they went back to full turn-based, but then afterwards they went to a different version of an active battle system where you're even able to move around the battlefield for 12 and 13, and then 15 is just full action game at that point, though there's certain bits where you can at least slow down time. And even with the Final Fantasy VII remake, they've tweaked it. You know, you can run around the battlefield and attack and whatnot. It's fun. But yeah, so you fight the guard scorpion, and then you have, at this point, you've set a timer, and I believe at that point, you have to fight the guard scorpion and escape all within the time, I think. It's either that, or this game's a little bit more forgiving and you're able to do it. Let's see. Yeah, it looks like, you do the time limit afterwards. I think between the remake and this game, it kind of switches up how you do it. Because I don't think you get attacked by the guard scorpion until after you set the timer in the remake. But in this, the timer gets set after you defeat the guard scorpion, I think. But to be fair, a lot of it is the random battles tend to slow you down a lot sometimes. They're not too bad, but they do end up being a factor. So after you destroy the reactor, you then have to get out. So you get out, you kind of explore the little area around, and then you end up in Sector 7 after you hop a train and get back home. There, we're kind of shown a bit of Cloud's personality. So at this point, you've been working with Barrett. Primarily, it's just you and Barrett, I think, at this point. But the other members are Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge. That's a classic thing that ends up in the Final Fantasy games. There's almost always a character named Biggs and a character named Wedge. At least from, I think, the 3rd game on is when the Biggs and Wedge start being introduced. They might actually be in the 2nd game as well, but I don't think they're in the 1st one. But they're reoccurring characters that appear. Then back at base, we're introduced to Tifa. We're introduced to Barrett's daughter, Marlene. Cloud just wants to get paid. He's a hard mercenary just out there for cash. Though Tifa is actually his childhood friend. They've known each other since they were kids. And they hung out and they had a great time and whatnot. But, ever since he joined Soldier and became a first-class soldier, he's become a bit of a dick, it would seem. Though, people always show Cloud after this game as being like a stoic, a bit of a douchebag, but he's mostly stoic and like closed out. He's depressed sad boy. In the original game, he actually had some like personality and was quite quirky. In fact, very early on, he hops up on a table and just crosses his legs and is just like swinging it there. So he's a bit more cocky and like self-sure of himself. He's a little bit more fun and funny at the same time. Then, so from this point, it's, you kind of go around a little bit. They ask you to assist on another raid, and you agree. So now you guys attack the Sector 5 reactor. But this seems to have been a bit of a trap. Well, this time Tifa joins you. But this seems to have been a little bit of a trap, as they seem to have been a bit more prepared for you. So you fight their big robot that they had prepared, and while Tifa and Barrett are able to escape, Cloud ends up falling from the disc all the way from Sector 5 down to Sector 8. It's at that point that he meets Aerith, or Eris. It depends. Supposedly, depending on the version of the game that you have, depends on what she's called. Of course, I believe you're also able to just rename her, so there's that too. But yeah, so you meet her. She helps guide you around. Like, she helps take care of you for a minute while you recover and you help her out. And it's just kind of like a nice little introductory thing. Then you head back to Sector 7. Everyone's happy to know that you're alive and whatnot. But then there's a bit of an issue going on in the wall market. So Tifa ends up being taken to the wall market. So you and Eris, kind of are going to try and break her out and rescue her. Because I believe his name's Don Corneo. He's trying to, he the best way to put it is, it's very similar to Arabian Nights, where he supposedly brings in a new woman every night kind of thing, and he's just a creepy lecher. So they need to break in, but in order to do so, they have to get all dressed up. So this is where the whole dress thing is, and Cloud has to disguise himself as a woman. Now, funnily enough, I completely, when I was playing, I completely missed the Honeybee Inn, and I just couldn't go back, no matter what. Because I just didn't think to go to that section of the map, because I don't think I learned about the selection thing until a little bit too late, where you can see where you can actually leave the map. Oh well. So, anywho, so you go chase after Tifa, get your disguise, break in, and then I believe based on certain things, he will then choose between Cloud, Aerith, and Tifa, depending on choices you've made. If you're the one selected, they are given to the guards. So you have to go, I believe technically regardless, you kind of have to sort of rescue them. But you guys threaten the Dawn, and then you have to, I believe, go through the sewers, go into the train graveyard, and then you pop back out, and then you're back in Sector 7. And then at this point, you start going towards the Shinra building. You go through the Shinra building to, take down Shinra. You find Red 13, who in my playthrough, I decided to keep things a bit simple and just name him Reggie. Because it's kind of, it works okay. And then you start to notice some things happening as you go through, that Shinra's been visited by Sephiroth. You've been hearing some whispers here and there that Sephiroth is still alive and is hanging about. And so when you go up, you see that everyone's been slaughtered on the upper floors, and the president, who's been you've been seeing some cutscenes of here and there, has been killed. And then you kind of have to make your escape at this point. I think there might be a Genova boss fight. I know that there is in the remake, so I do have to put a little bit of a disclaimer. I know that it's a little bit late to be doing this, but I did say earlier, it has been 5 years since I actually played the beginning of this game. So hopefully, my kind of fuzziness isn't too bad. But there's a bit of a boss fight here, and then you have to escape. At which point you do the mini game, the motorcycle mini game. But then you escape, you escape Midgar, and that's the Midgar section. Like, the Midgar story is relatively short, and boy, did they really stretch it out for the remake. I appreciate it, but at the same time, boy howdy. But yeah, so you come out, and you are at Calm. That's the name of the town, and this is where we start to get some backstory. Like, this is where we properly hear the backstory of Cloud, how he came back to town, and he helped Tifa. Like, you know, after he became a soldier, he came back to his town at Mount Nibble. I believe he's from Nibelheim is the name of his town. But he came back, and you know, it was supposed to be like a joyous reunion and whatnot, but there was trouble at the reactor, and he was there with Sephiroth. So they go. Tifa guides them up to the reactor, where Sephiroth goes bonkers. Cloud has to fight off Sephiroth. Sephiroth attacks Tifa, and you know, there's a whole ordeal. But then, from there, we kind of go into the exploring phase, because now we're in the open world. Things are bigger now. So you go to the Chocobo farm, learn about Chocobos and whatnot, because you need to use Chocobos to cross the plains, I think. It's like this section where there's like this worm thing, and I think you have to use a Chocobo to get across that to avoid having to fight the worm thing. And then you eventually end up seeing like the power of Sephiroth, this worm thing that you can't really kill, at least at this point in the game, is absolutely destroyed by Sephiroth. It's just murdered. But you work your way to Fort Condor, you learn about their struggles, you know, and you help them with another minigame of defending Fort Condor. It's a bit of a weird one, I'll be honest. I don't think I fully understood the mechanics, but it worked out okay. It worked out. But then you go to Junon, and there they have a big gun. It's like this small little like hub-ish area that's like at the base of the thing, and you have to bribe your way in. And then you have to sneak around. I think you get into an occasional fight here or there, but for the most part, you then end up disguising yourself as a soldier, and you join the parade for the new president of Shinra. Then, you work your way through, and you sneak onto a ferry. The ferry takes you to Costa del Sol. And then from there, you work your way over to Mount Coral, eventually to the Golden Saucer. Because you have to go to the town of North Coral, I guess it's called. And that has a tram up to the Golden Saucer. It's a weird location for it, but it's there. Then you end up getting the, whatchamacallit? Dune buggy? I guess it is. I think you get that from Golden Saucer or around Golden Saucer. You get the dune buggy, and you're able to then cross like the sand and whatnot to get to the Golden Saucer. And anyway, I believe it's around this time that you start kind of confronting your party's past, specifically Barrett's past, because he, I believe, is actually from Coral. You end up confronting his old friend, the actual father of Marlene, I believe, or part of his past is that. And it turns out that he survived, and you have to fight him, I think. So it's a whole thing. It's very sad. But also around this time is when you can get Yuffie. So once you can encounter her in like any forest at random, and you have to do a very specific set of things to actually get her on side. Otherwise, you might not ever meet her. She's technically an optional party member, along with Vincent, who we will get to in a minute. But anyway, so you go to Cosmo Canyon, and it's at this point that... Yeah, you go to Cosmo Canyon, and it's at this point where you can go through some of Red 13's backstory, where he always felt angry at his, like, I think, father for abandoning him, but then he learns that the reason that his father abandoned him was to, keep him safe. He ended up actually going to fight something and keep it at bay, and he is now perpetually frozen at the top of a cliff. So Red 13 comes to an understanding, and it's very sad. Let's see. Then you go to the observatory, talk to the old man. He gives you kind of a breakdown of, the planet's dying, but trying to fight back. It's having a bit of an issue. And, Sephiroth is gonna try to do some stuff. And it's not good. So, stop that, please. So, then you go back to Nibelheim. Or, you go to Nibelheim for the first time in the game, but technically Cloud is returning to Nibelheim. And it's here that things aren't quite right. Because the town was supposed to have burned down 5 years ago. But it's not burned down anymore. In fact, there's people all around, and it's all weird. So you go around, there's these guys in hoods and whatnot, mumbling. You're trying to figure out what's going on. Things don't feel right. You explore the mansion, and this is where you come across Sephiroth. It's a very weird scene. He flies out, and it's like a ghost spirit thing, and it's very silly. But you explore the mansion. You end up finding Vincent at this point, and you can recruit him into your party. I think you have to get like a special key somewhere else in the mansion to get Vincent. And to get that, you have to fight like a pretty hard enemy, at least for this level of the game. So at this point, I spent like a good long time grinding. Especially since, according to one of the things I was looking at the time, it recommended grinding up Aerith, or Eris, because you were going to need her later on, because she kind of forces her way into your party near the end of this disc, and you're going to have to do some fights with her, so you might as well make sure that she's, spec'd up to handle it. Or else she'll be underleveled, and you'll just have a bad time. So I did that, and then after you go through Mount Nibble, you end up at Rocket Town, where you meet Sid, and you're able to get Sid on side. Though he's, I believe, a required party member, so of course he'll be on side. He has a dream of, taking a rocket to space. He's been working on this rocket for Shinra for ages. He doesn't want to be working for Shinra at all. He just wants a rocket. He likes the rocket. And so he joins the party. At this point, you're able to do because I believe he gives you... whatchamacallit? What is it called? It's a plane. The Bronco? Yeah, the tiny Bronco. So the tiny Bronco is able to do like some stuff and whatnot. And I believe it's at this point that you're able to do the Wutai side quest. Maybe. I think you might be able to. It's a completely optional side quest. You don't have to go to Wutai ever, technically. Then from here you work your way back to the Golden Saucer, and this is where you, depending on how you've built your relationships with characters, will have a specific scene with a specific character. I cannot for the life of me remember what scene I got, but it was something at some point, certainly. Yeah, no, I literally can't remember who it was. I think it was Tifa, because I generally tend to push towards that. So it was probably Tifa. Then from there, you work your way to the Temple of the Ancients. You learn about the Black Materia. You get the Black Materia. Then you go through the Sleeping Forest, which is like, I think, towards the city of, the Forgotten City of the Ancients. So, yeah, you work your way through the forest, go through to the Ancients. And then I believe this is where the whole big twist, the one that everyone knows, Aerith dies. And everyone kind of goes into a bit of a shock after this. But that is the end of Disc 1. Then we go to Disc 2. So everyone's still reeling after the death of Aerith. So, fuck it. I merged both names into one. But yeah, so everyone's still reeling over that, but you need to get out, and Cloud is starting to act a bit weird, and, kind of says, we need to go north. So, north you go. You go to a small town in the mountains, and you solve some minor stuff there. This is where you get some of the information on Eris and her parentage. And, it's a lot of learning about the past. All right, so eventually, after learning about some of Eris' past, you go through and you end up on Gaia's Cliff and at the Promised Land, where a whole lot of stuff goes down. Cloud is acting super weird. He ends up giving the Black Materia to Sephiroth, kind of semi-sacrificing himself. A whole lot of stuff starts breaking down, where Sephiroth is pretty much saying that Cloud was never at Nibelheim 5 years ago. In fact, he claims that Cloud never existed. He is but a clone of Sephiroth. And that those people in the hoods that were like hanging around Nibelheim, who have worked their way here, are also clones of Sephiroth, but failed clones. And they are all but pieces of Sephiroth trying to come together to reform the full Sephiroth. So, Cloud then has a bit of a mental break and ends up kind of getting washed away into the whatchamacallit? What is it called? The Life Force? I think it's technically called. The mana? Crap, how have I forgotten what it's called? Life Stream? Anyway, yeah, we're shown that the guy who went through all that stuff was a guy named Zack. And he's the one that went to Nibelheim all those years ago. He's the one that tried to save Tifa and whatnot. And technically, that all of Cloud's memories of his time at Nibelheim were implanted because of Tifa, in a way, her kind of impression of a childhood friend that she lost ages ago, kind of grafted onto Cloud. It's very weird and confusing. But anywho, for now, we start kind of following Tifa and Barrett as they wake up back in Junon, where they have been kind of captured by Shinra. The weapons have been awakened, specifically Ultimate Weapon and Diamond Weapon have awoken, and Ultimate Weapon is kind of hassling Junon at the moment. But they're trying to keep it at bay with the big gun. But anywho, you have to now escape. You escape Junon, and there's a whole battle sequence and whatnot. Tifa and Scarlet, who we haven't really mentioned. Scarlet is one of the Shinra bad guys. She gets kind of dealt with a little bit later, along with I think the guy's name is Hodor. I think is his name. She works with the main military guy for Shinra. It's a whole mess, and yeah, but you make your way to Mideel, where you find Cloud. Cloud's here. He kind of just washed up. So Tifa decides to hang with Cloud to, keep him safe, while the rest of the crew goes hunting for huge materia. So Shinra is currently gathering huge materia to help power the gun that they've taken and mounted on Midgar. So they took the gun from Junon, mounted it on Midgar, but made it a bit bigger to kind of act as like a railgun and feed the power from the reactors to power the gun. They did this very fast, by the way. But yeah, so they're hunting huge materia because their other plan, because Sephiroth has summoned Meteor, and their plan is to try to load the huge materia into a rocket, shoot it into space, and blow up Meteor. But that does not work. Anyway, so you go back to Mideel to check up on Tifa, see how things are going. They're not going great. I believe Ultimate Weapon attacks, you fight off Ultimate Weapon. Then Tifa ends up falling into the life stream with Cloud, and so while in there, she starts untangling the truth of Cloud. It turns out that yes, Cloud was indeed her childhood friend, but at the same time, no, he absolutely was not. He wanted to be her friend. She was always a outside figure in his life. He was a bit of a loner and felt separated from the other kids, but he obviously had a bit of a crush on Tifa. And he even, followed her around a bit, wanting to be part of that group. But during an incident, when Tifa and Cloud Tifa decides to kind of go up Mount Nibble, and her friends start following her, but kind of trail off because they get scared. Cloud follows. Even though he follows, he runs into a bit of an issue where she gets in trouble and he's not able to save her. He ends up getting blamed and kind of shunned a bit for it, because Tifa was very popular in the town. But he still kind of forges on. He ends up developing a want to get stronger so that he could have protected her. And so she ended up in a coma for like a few days, I believe. But yeah, so he ends up building this desire to get stronger, and he figures that the best way to do that would be to join Soldier, the Shinra company, and become super strong. So he calls her out one day, I believe specifically on a day where she's not feeling great. I believe that's a day that one of her parents died, I think. But anywho, he calls her out to the water tower and tells her what he intended to do. He intends to leave, join Soldier. She's a bit confused by it, but it does end up leaving an impression on her. And, she asks, hey, if I'm ever in trouble, come save me. And he promises that he will. And then he leaves. And that did leave an impression on her, and she did always wonder, he was always at the back of her mind when she kept wondering, I wonder how Cloud's doing. She kept checking newspaper articles to see if he had made it to Soldier and was starting to make headlines, but nothing. Then, the whole 5 years earlier incident happens where, yes, indeed, he was not the one there. He was there, though. He wasn't a soldier because he wasn't able to make it in Soldier. He didn't quite qualify for the program. He was basically just a normal grunt soldier at that point. He was there with Zack and Sephiroth, and he was there when things kind of went to shit. He is the one that tried to turn Tifa away at the reactor, but she, of course, forged on anyway. And he did indeed go to face off against Sephiroth afterwards. Him and Zack did try to fight Sephiroth. Zack got knocked out, but Cloud went in, fought Sephiroth and got Tifa out of there. And that's the thing. Then he was drafted into... Like, between that and the Midgar thing, one, you can easily miss this bit of the story, by the way. The bit that I'm about to talk about, you can miss it. The in between the 5 years ago incident and him arriving at Midgar, you can miss. So, to do this, on disc 3, you have to go back to the mansion to get this scene. And I'm talking about it a little bit early, but it's fair enough to talk about now. Because, again, you can miss it, and it's kind of unrelated to the overall story. Basically, what ends up happening is Cloud is kind of drafted into the soldier program by force, sort of, because he technically was the one to kill Sephiroth and whatnot. And he's experimented on. Some Genova cells are put into him. That is just kind of the soldier. That's how soldiers are supposedly made, is some Genova cells are put in. Thus, part of why he's able to be controlled by Sephiroth and all the weirdness that went on earlier in the game. Him and Zack escape. Now, it's a bit weird because if you investigate the 2 test tubes in the mansion, one says... we need to get out of here, and then the other one says, during this time. You know, not super subtle escape planning, but yeah, so him and Zack end up breaking out and escaping, and they go on the run. They get a ride to Midgar. Zack starts spouting his dreams about wanting to be a mercenary. Cloud's kind of catatonic at this point. How he was able to scratch the "we need to get out of here" thing, I don't know. But he's catatonic, and eventually they make it to Midgar. Cloud's like knocked out. Zack gets killed, and Cloud is left alone because they assume that he's like pretty much going to die anyway, so they just leave him alone. And he recovers and pretty much absorbs Zack's personality and his dreams, essentially, through like pseudo-osmosis, I guess you could call it. Mental osmosis because of all the trauma, I guess you could say. But, so yeah, he takes up the sword, he goes down, becomes a mercenary, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, it's a very complicated thing that happened to him. But after that, he's able to recover. He is fully recovered, and his personality is actually a bit different now. He's a lot more reserved. He's not quite so bombastic and standoffish. He's now kind of shy and awkward. But yeah, so you get the last... Well, not the last one. You get the huge materia from the underwater reactor near Junon. Then you go back to Rocket City. Fight your way to the rocket. It's set on an automatic launch. You end up being launched into space on the rocket. You take the huge materia out of the rocket, and then you escape. You have collected all of the huge materia. Congratulations. The rocket, regardless, fails to destroy the meteor, and so now you must start figuring things out a bit. So this is where we learn what Aerith's plan was. So you go back to the Forgotten City with the old man that explains stuff to you back at Cosmo Canyon. He explains to you more in the ancient city that there's like this music box thing, and it explains that there is a materia that counteracts the black materia called Holy, where it's pretty much like a prayer to the earth to cleanse itself of what it deems to be harming it. And that is what Aerith was doing. She was charging Holy when she was killed. And according to them, it worked. while we don't have Holy, it should still, in theory, work from wherever it is, because she was able to charge it. So then you have to work your way back to Midgar, where Diamond Weapon attacks. You have to fight Diamond Weapon. It gets shot by a railgun and dies. Then you go into Midgar. You break in, and you in Diamond Weapon's attack, it killed President Rufus, the Shinra president. So, what's her face, Scarlet, and I'm just gonna say Hodor. I think that's his name, the military guy. They are trying to assume de facto kind of control, and I think his name's Singh, who's part of the Turks, who's this group that's been kind of hassling you throughout the game, though they're pretty chill. He's I believe Kate Sith. That's the impression I've been getting through the game. I don't know if it's fully directly stated that is who Kate Sith is, but I'm pretty sure that's who Kate Sith is. It's like, because early on you learn that Kate Sith is very obviously a agent for Shinra. I believe you meet him at the Golden Saucer, and he's supposed to be a spy. Now, he's not really a spy. He's a Shinra agent. That's what we learn. That is just hanging around, and he was planning on spying on them, but he decided against it, and he wants to really help them. He ends up sacrificing himself, and then just comes back in a new body, because literally he's just a plush toy, so being controlled remotely by this agent. But yeah, I believe he's the leader of the Turks. But anywho, he wants to keep things calm, but they're like, no, we want the fight. So you go fight them. They stop. You defeat Shinra. Shinra's gone. Done. Tick. Now it's time to move on. And that's where Disc 3 comes in. Disc 3 is literally just wrap up. Seriously. This is where you can get the scene that we just talked about with Cloud. But otherwise, you go into the crater, the northern crater, and you work your way down, and then you fight the final boss. The final boss is in 3 phases, technically. So you work your way down, and once you hit the point of no return, you fight Genova, then you fight one version of Sephiroth, and then you fight the final version of Sephiroth. Now, I've gotten all the way to the final version of Sephiroth, but then I died. And funnily enough, if you die in the final battle with Sephiroth, the game counts it as you having beaten Sephiroth, and gives you the trophy for getting Omni Slash if you haven't gotten it at that point, which I find funny. The other way to get Omni Slash is a very tedious thing. And yes, so let's start talking some mechanics. Well, real quick, let's say that's the end of the game. You know, presumably you defeat the boss, you win. I know that there's supposed to be another scene where, you know, Sephiroth's still there. So Cloud, it's just him and Cloud. You have to wait for Cloud's limit to charge, and then you use Omni Slash. That's why you technically get Omni Slash if you defeat the actual final boss of Final Fantasy VII. But anyway, so yeah. The mechanics. Why haven't I beaten the final boss yet? So that's partially time management. I've been working on the game that I'm going to be talking about next week right now, and I focused a little bit too hard on that. Basically, the game I'm working on right now is Legend of Heroes Trails from Zero, and I need to finish the game. Like, similarly with Final Fantasy VII, I need to finish the game for that. Because at least with Final Fantasy VII, I'm pretty sure that there isn't going to be all that much in the way of, like, cutscenes at the end. At least I don't feel like there's going to be all that much in the way of cutscenes. I hope there is. I'd like to know if there's like a good feeling of definitive conclusion. But otherwise, I'm not fully expecting it. I know for a fact, because it's a Trails game, that Trails from Zero is going to have like 20 minutes to an hour's worth of fucking cutscenes at the end, where everyone's just talking and then potential setup for the sequel. I know that there's a sequel to this game, a direct one. It's Trails to Azure, or Trails from Azure, or Trails that are Azure. I know it's Trails Azure. But yeah. Now, I had blocked out certain weeks for each chapter. The game is split into 5 chapters, and this coming up week after this episode comes out, I was supposed to do chapter 5. Well, I got a little bit ahead of myself last week, and this weekend I kind of made a bit of a push to get as close to the end as I could. And I believe I already said, but I'm at about the same point in that game as I am with this game. I'm at the final boss. So now it's pretty even. So at that point I was like, okay, I can push off that until later, and then I'll just do the boss real quick. I was able to, once I did the first one, I placed the save, because during the whole like end dungeon thing, you're given a pretty much portable checkpoint, or a save point. Because in the game, the way you save is not on the overworld map. When on the overworld map, you have to find the little question marks. And these question marks are where you can save. In the Final Fantasy remake, it's benches. There's save benches with the little question mark. But yeah, in the original, they're just these big question marks that you have to touch, and then you can save. You're given a save crystal at the end, and you can place it anywhere within the final dungeon, save for, I believe, after the point of no return. Although you might be able to. It's kind of useless if you put it in the point of no return, because, well, you can't go back at that point. You're kind of stuck then grinding in the point of no return if you so choose to do so. Though technically, it is one of the fastest ways to grind the point of no return area. But yeah. So the issue I'm coming across is my team is powerful enough to get through the first 2 bosses, but not quite powerful enough to defeat the last boss. Also known as, I think it's called Safer Sephiroth. Yeah, let me check. It is called, Safer Sephiroth. Because the 3 bosses are Genova Synthesis, Bizarro Sephiroth, and then Safer Sephiroth. And their HP and whatnot is based off of a variety of things, and it's very annoying. And not super easy to kill. It's a pain. But yeah. So the first time I did it, I placed the save crystal at the first meeting place, and I was like, okay, cool. I can use this as like a grinding thing. But then I learned, no, that's a really bad idea, because the run-up is a fucking nightmare. And so, which means that if you fail at the final boss, and you die at the final boss, it means you have to do the run-up all the way to the point of no return again. And then you have to... When I learned that was what it was going to be like, I was like, nah, I'm good. I'm good. I'm going to go to an older save, get the save crystal again, and place it at the end. I also decided to do a little bit of grinding. So I was at the level I was at when I first placed the save crystal, or when I first did a little bit of grinding near the save crystal. By the time I, went to attempt the run-up to put the save crystal down again, if that makes any sense. Hopefully it does. But yeah, so I did that. I went and got some ultimate weapons as well to try to make things a little bit easier. And to be fair, for the most part, it did. and I got some good materia, and things are looking okay. It's just that Safer Sephiroth hits like a fucking truck, and it's very easy to die, and it's very, demotivating to know that you're going to have to do that run-up again. Even if it's a shorter run-up, it's still, you have to fight the other two bosses again. And hell, as it was, the issue I was having was getting to, the Genova. You have to go down these, stone steps thing, and these floating stones. And there's a good chance that you'll end up getting a random encounter at that point. And most of the random encounters, it's between two for the most part. The two random encounters are an iron golem, like a big iron guy, and a zombie dragon. And the zombie dragon's much easier to kill, in my opinion. And the Iron Knight kept killing Cloud. So Cloud, whenever we were able to skirt by in one of the Iron Knight battles, Cloud got no experience. So that was rough. But then I was able to get through Genova Synthesis, Bizarro Sephiroth, and then I got to Safer Sephiroth again, and it didn't work. So for the most part, I will get to it. I will do it. I promise. But it's rougher. It's rougher to do. Again, my favorite Final Fantasy is still 9, I think, and I will eventually do an episode on it, and that's going to be fun because I've been playing it for about as long as Final Fantasy VII. I'm so close to the end, damn it. I'm at a good grinding spot, though, in Final Fantasy IX. Anyway. Let's see what else is there to talk about now that we've gone through the story. So grinding and the good items. So the good items are kind of trapped behind annoying side quests. Annoying, extremely tedious side quests. So, to get some of the most powerful materia, you have to do the Chocobo side quest. The Chocobo side quest is catching, breeding, and racing Chocobos. In fact, I did a good chunk of the Chocobo side quest in order to get a good enough Chocobo, to get enough money, to get one of the best materia you can from the Golden Saucer, and that is the EXP Plus materia. This materia, as its name implies, gives you more experience per thing, and it starts at 1.5, and when it levels up, it goes to 2 times. So you get double experience per fight. Very useful for grinding. But I got it, started grinding, and it was going okay, but it got a bit tedious. So, at that point, I kind of decided to move on. Though I did go and I defeated Ultimate Weapon, got the Ultimate Sword. I got Tifa and Barrett's Ultimate Weapons. So, I have them. Tifa and Barrett's Ultimate Weapons are just kind of fucking lying around when you go to hunt for them. They're just around. Tifa's is a little bit more annoying because you have to get hers, you have to go to the fossil place, have them dig up a key to get back into Midgar, to actually be able to explore Midgar properly. Well, I say explore it properly. You can go to the wall market and the rest of Sector 8. That's also known as the church where Aerith hung out and Cloud fell through. But yeah, so there's that. Then I would have liked to have gotten Omnislash early. That way I would have it. Or finished, because you can't get Knights of the Round until you get a golden Chocobo so that you can cross the oceans on a Chocobo. If you do that, then you go to a very hidden materia cave, and then you can get Knights of the Round. tedious and annoying, so I just didn't do it. Then there's the you can get Omni Slash. Now that's of course if Cloud's able to even learn it at this point. I'm not sure if he can, but it's also stupidly expensive from the battle arena on the Golden Saucer. Basically, in order to get it, you would have to do a pretty much perfect run through the battle arena, or sit there and grind. And the issue is, the way the Golden Saucer works is they have their own currency within the Golden Saucer, known as, I think, GP, or game points, or whatever. You can get game points directly through cash if you find the guy that's just kind of hanging around near the entrance. If you find him, he'll give you a pretty much 1 to 100 conversion rate, i.e. 1 game point to 100 gil. Now, I was fine for gil. I'm pretty flush with cash by this point in the game, so I would loop him around to get that. But the thing is, in the battle arena, you can't buy anything with game points except for tickets to fight in the arena. So you have to have a good amount of the game points in order to get battle points. And there's no direct conversion of game points to battle points except for going through the battle arena, getting a shit ton of the points that way, and it's like a multiplier thing. So the more rounds you do, and random handicaps you take, the more more battle points you earn. It's theoretically possible to get it in one if you get the perfect run of relatively easy things in the early thing, and then the all materia deactivated for the last one. If you get perfect combos that way, then you're golden. If not, you're kind of fucked. So yeah, it's a bit rough. So I gave up on that, and I was like, you know what, I should be okay to take on the final boss, and it just did not turn out that way. Oh well. But yeah, other than that, the thing that's kind of annoying is the fact that a lot of scenes are hidden. There's nothing pointing you to go back to the mansion in the third disc at all. In fact, you're pretty much directed to go straight to the end of the game and fight Sephiroth. So it's kind of weird, I think, if that the scene with the mansion hidden. Even more hidden is the scenes with Vincent, Vincent's backstory, which tells you everything about him. Now, to be fair, he's technically an optional character, so yeah. But yeah, his backstory's super sad, and it's also the origin of Sephiroth. You kind of learn it anyway when you confront him in the raid on Midgar, and you kill him on the raid on Midgar, but otherwise it's hidden completely, and you don't get the full story or some special items unless you go looking for that. It's really sad. But yeah, with that, I think that's a pretty good place to kind of leave it off. I enjoyed the game. I'm very much looking forward to the second part of the remake. I will be playing it. I might even at some point replay the first part, Final Fantasy Remake, and I might do an episode on it at some point. Probably a little bit after the second part, Rebirth, comes out, because I do have things pretty much planned through to April, though some things might change, to be fair. Might. As I have applied to another adventure. We shall see if I get it. I'll probably find out within the next week or so. But otherwise, I do think that everything should work out okay, even if I do go on an adventure. I can have some things pre-done, some things not pre-done. But otherwise, we'll see. You know, it's going to be a fun time. What else was it? Yeah, so things that I'm expecting. So for remake, there's the obvious weight of the original story. Are they going to follow the original story? And I took the ending of remake as a blatant sign saying that no, we're going to change some stuff. Things aren't set in stone from this point on. In fact, a big part of like remake's story is these fucking ghost things are trying to make sure that the story stays on track, and we don't want to fucking follow that. So, yeah, we'll see how things go. But with that said, we'll go ahead and leave it. Next episode is going to be on Legend of Heroes Trails from Zero. It's going to be another ordeal episode. That one I will finish. I promise I will finish it. And if I finish Final Fantasy VII between now and when I record that episode, I will give you guys an update on the very end of the game. See, I didn't even look up the ending to talk about it. I know that they win, and then Advent Children happens, and Dirge of Cerberus ? But yeah. Let me think. Yeah. So yeah, if I do that, I will keep you guys updated on that. But anywho, I will have a lot to discuss next week as it is. So we'll see how things go. Anywho, thank you guys so much for listening. If you guys enjoyed this on YouTube, feel free to give it a like, comment, subscribe. Otherwise, on any podcast catcher of your choice, feel free to rate and review it and share it with your friends, as word of mouth is always good. Anyway, once again, thank you guys so much for listening, and I will talk to you guys next week. Goodbye.